I do that. I'll like be aware of the audience while not addressing them, and it feels very rude. Hello, audience. I'm glad you're here with us today.
Oh, it's 11:11. Perfect time to
Whoa!
start.
Welcome to the True Love Podcast for two practicing light workers. Well, I'm just going to say that. I'm taking that way too fast. For those of you who listen on 2x speed, like myself, I'm going to try to slow this down for the first time in my life. Welcome.
Really?
I can't do it if you're making me laugh. You're trying to make me break character. Welcome to the True North Podcast, where two practicing light workers get together once a week to continue an ongoing conversation about wholeness and healing for body and mind so that you can live as your true self and follow your true north. I'm Ryan.
And I'm happy.
I made it! I made it through!
I feel like you were, I feel like I was in a wedding ceremony and you were reciting vows, you know, where they're very slow, like, to have and to hold, pause, and sickness
Look at your
and
hand
health.
where you wrote it on your
Pause.
palm.
Yeah. Like you were very slow, but in 2x speed, that's going to sound great.
I hope so. We're going to see. We're going to see what it sounds like. Someone who's listening in 2x speed, leave a comment and tell us. Or speed. 2x seed? I say 2x seed?
Seed.
Someone who's planting twice as many seeds today as normal.
So I am
What's going on?
coming into this with nothing today. I have nothing today. Here I am. I'm coming in
because
blind.
I'm coming into it with something.
Awesome.
Oh, I'm coming into it with something.
Okay.
Really, I actually do want to continue our ongoing conversation from last time. Because I feel like that conversation never got, like, there's more. There's more.
Which last time? Last time our
The
question
one,
and
not
answer?
not the AMA,
Okay.
but the one before that, where I was complaining about my ADHD the whole time.
And I was trying to get you to feel grateful, and then I realized you were using my gratitude in spite. That one?
Yes. Yeah.
Check. Okay.
That one.
Circle back. Here we are.
How do you feel about that? I feel like you still feel some type of way about how that went down.
No, because that's your business.
Okay.
No.
Well,
I have no feeling other than my thought is you are getting nothing out of it. But again,
Well.
that's on you.
so we had that conversation. And then I had a couple conversations with a couple other people, one of which was my therapist, and you all said the same thing in different words, which was essentially, you're wired how you're wired. Like, that's as deep as that rabbit hole needs
True
to go.
story.
And while my wiring, that we like to actually label as ADHD, makes certain things harder for me, it also makes certain things easier for me. It is a gift, and it's also a challenge in different arenas. And I'm not special, because everyone's wiring makes some things harder for them and some things easier for them.
Right.
And so I think I was spending a lot of time making ADHD the villain and the culprit behind why certain things are difficult for me. But I think learning how to manage the parts of life that are difficult for you is just part of what it means to grow up and be an adult. And so I started really leaning into the ways that it's a gift. And kind of, I mean, you kind of push back against the label in that episode, right? Like, why do you need a label?
Yeah.
Why do we need to call it anything? And I mean, there are I think some merits to giving it a name, but I also think I'm now coming around to hearing what you were saying, which is like, if you giving it a label can also load it up with all the things that label's loaded up with.
Yes.
That
right.
it doesn't need to be loaded up with. And it could, I'm not even calling it, I mean, I call it my ADHD when I'm talking about it in terms of the way ADHD is specifically different from a neurotypical wiring. But when I talk about it in general, I'm just referring to it as my wiring. And I have, after we had that conversation, someone that I know very well sent me Marco Polo and was like, hey, I heard on this podcast that you have ADHD. Well, I'm in a a long distance relationship with somebody who has ADHD, and it's really hard for me. So, can you help me figure out how to navigate that? And we were able to go back and forth, and I was able to give her some stuff that she can use to kind of, figure that out. And then I have another friend who's like, my kid has ADHD, and he doesn't really know how it works. And so, could you send him a thing to explain And so there's all these, like, now there's ways that it's not only benefiting me, but it's also opening doors for me to be helpful to other people.
Right.
And so, because of course that's how the universe works.
Yes. It is.
But then I'm also learning that learning about ADHD helps me learn about myself. But when I learn things about myself, that doesn't necessarily mean I'm learning about ADHD. Like, there's some things where I'm like, this is my experience, and that's because I have ADHD. And people are like, well, I don't, and that's my experience too. So, like, calm down about it. Not you're not defined by this thing. It's not. It's just a part of you, but it's not you. And so I felt myself getting really wrapped up in that whole going down that rabbit trail. And then, yeah.
And then, yeah.
Well, you keep on inhaling, and I have this idea that like what you're gonna say is better than what I'm gonna ramble about.
Because I have been thinking about this too, and I'm glad you pointed out that I was pushing back on you labeling it, because after I, of course, go back and listen and I think of all the things I should have said.
I'm glad you do that.
In that moment, I was talking to you, but I also want to point out that, like, I do believe strongly that labels are important when they come to identifying how people need to be helped in ways that they need to be helped. And I think
right.
I felt like I sounded dismissive of saying that we even had to label it in the first place. But my point really was that I felt that you were making that as your own true definition, and, as you said, carried the weight of everything that we put on that. And right. I didn't want you to see yourself that way. It's a label that helps you get medication that you may need to make life easier for you, but it's not a label that labels you and puts you in this box.
Right. And I think, like, the label's also good for if I want to go out and find science or find right. things like resources to help with this. It's good to have a label to point to and put in the Google, and then know that the thing I'm reading about is the thing that I carry around. You know, like, I learned that people with ADHD don't really have a fully developed sense of object permanence. Okay. Like, you think you do. Like, my wife and kid are running an errand right now, and they're going to come back while we're recording this. And I know that they exist. So it's not like a toddler, like an infant version of object permanence where they think you disappear. But then when it comes to, like, calendar things and to-do lists and thoughts and ideas, those definitely do not exist if they're not in front of me. And I was watching TikTok one night, which I never do. I don't know why. I was up at like 12:30 just watching TikTok. And I think I was avoiding being asleep. I don't know why, because I love sleep, but in this particular moment I just felt the need to just stay awake as long as I could. And I found this one where it's this older gentleman who also has ADHD, and every video he makes, he's talking about ADHD, and he explains that we don't have object permanence. And then he says, that's why we love messes. And I thought, we love our messes. And one of the things that my wife and I used to struggle with early in our marriage was that she's very tidy, and I was very not. Any space that was my space was a mess. Papers everywhere, stuff everywhere, things everywhere all the time. There were like drawers, but then there were things that would go in those drawers, but they weren't in the drawers. They were next to the drawers or on top of the thing. And for some reason, I defended the mess. Like, I remember having discussions where I was like, I need mess in my life. And I remember in those moments hearing myself say that and think, why? What kind of adult needs mess in their life? That doesn't even make sense. Organization is better in so many ways, and messes actually stress me out. So why am I even defending this? But I did. I just pushed back on her expectation that our house would be mess-free ever. And we even had an agreement where there would be certain pockets of the house that I was allowed to have my mess in, that she would choose not to worry about. But I needed to have the mess. I defended that. I fought it tooth and nail. I didn't even know why. And then this video on TikTok is like, well, we like our messes because we want to see everything. We just need everything to be visible because we intrinsically know that if I don't see something, I'm going to forget that it exists. And so I don't like things in drawers. And I mean, look at, like, I have all my stuff is on the shelf where it's open shelves. My guitar, I have guitar cases. They're all stacked up in the corner, and the guitars are on the wall. Anytime we talk about storage and figuring out what we're going to do, my suggestion is always open shelving. I want things to be on display where we can see it and I can reach in and grab it. I don't have a dresser. I have cubbies. in my closet, and everything's folded up and stacked up like at a clothing store, or I can see all my clothes all at once. And I never thought about that, but that's totally true, because if something's in a drawer, I will forget that I have it. And so I'm listening to him talk about this, and everything's starting to make sense and click into place. Things from 10, 12 years ago are starting to all come and make sense to me. And I just start laughing. I'm just laying there on the couch in a pitch dark house, earbuds in, phone in hand, laughing. And then I realize I'm laughing so hard I have to cover my mouth. And then at some point I realize that I'm actually crying. Like, I don't know when the tears started, but at some point I realized that I had gone from laughing to crying, and then the crying turned into weeping, which turned into bawling. And I felt so seen and so broken at the same time. And I was like, where's the brokenness coming from?
Yeah, good question.
And then I remembered every time someone who is either a peer or an authority would make me feel wrong for being wired the way I'm wired. And they all that flooded back too. Like I at my last job, at one point, I was coming under fire because I was doodling during meetings. And
that was a bad thing?
it was seen as a bad thing because it was seen as me not being present, not
Checking
paying
out.
attention, checking out. I'm here physically because I have to be here, but I don't want to listen to what you're saying. And that's what it looks like. That is legit what it looks like. And if you're going to have your pen in your hand and a paper in front of you, you need to be taking notes, because that communicates that you are in fact listening and involved and engaged, right? But for me, doodling is note taking.
Yes, right.
Because of my wiring. I don't know if
It
this is
is
an
listening.
ADHD thing or not, but even in college, I learned this because I would sit in the front middle of the class, because statistically that's where the best grades come from. And so I would sit there, and right in front of the professor, I would sit there and doodle. And I had a couple of professors be like, "This that's really off-putting to me that you're just sitting there right in front of my face doodling and not even listening." And then I would repeat back to them word for word what they said. And not just like the last thing they said, but the last several things they said, because I can retrace that drawing, and every single line, every single little moment of shading, everything that I was doing with my pencil is attached to an audio imprint. And if I actually go back and redraw that drawing, I can regurgitate your entire lecture to you, word for word. And so that drawing is my notes. 100% is me taking notes. It is me engaging. It is me following you. And me taking notes distracts me because I'm worried about my handwriting. And me looking in your eyes distracts me because I'm looking at all of your micro expressions. And so I was being talked to by my boss's boss about why I just need to stop doodling during meetings. And I broke down crying. And I remember like, oh, this is embarrassing. This is really frustrating. I don't really know why I'm doing this and where it was coming from. I didn't know where it was coming from. I thought I was just really frustrated that day. And of course, when that happens, the tone shifts, and then we talked it out, and I was able to explain, and then from then on, I could doodle in front of people in meetings. But there was some shame there. There was some, don't be like this. There was some, okay, if you're like this, that's fine, but don't act like you're like this. Change the way that you present to make everybody else feel like you want them to feel. And so a whole life of being told that by parents, by teachers, by peers, by coworkers, by my spouse, it all flooded back from me watching this little 60-second YouTube video about object permanence.
I love
And
when that happens.
it was never labeled ADHD, because I only in the last year have even started to begin to engage with the idea that may be going on. But then if you look at my life story through that lens, it was always there. It was always there. And I carried a lot of shame around being made to feel like I was broken in some way, just because I function the way I function and I'm wired the way I'm wired. And I'm paying more attention to you when I'm drawing a picture when you're talking. And what that did was it revealed to me just how much is in there. And it was all coming out. Like it was all coming out. And I let it all out. And I let it out for days. And it was all kind of this culmination of where I am in life right now and what I need to process. And I'm grateful for it, because I feel like this is the time for me to embrace it and to see it for the gift that it is. And so even at the end of that one episode, I really was grateful for the ADHD, but it was for a different reason. I was grateful for the growth opportunities. I was grateful for the ways that it's created occasion for me to be highly motivated to learn how to manage life better, But now I'm in a different place with my gratitude towards it because it's a part of me. Mm-hmm. Like it always has been a part of me. And it always will be. And it's only a bad thing if I let it be. Mm-hmm. Anyway, I just wanted to close that loop.
I am glad that we did circle back to it. You circled back to it because I did feel like we sort of left it hanging. Oh, and there he is. There he Can you hear him in the background?
Hi, baby. Whoa, you got a mask? Oh, cool. My wife was making shapes with her hands, and he was telling her what shapes they were: oval, square, diamond, rectangle, whatever.
Yeah.
And then he said, rectangular prism. This kid is 2.5.
Who is this kid? That's awesome.
This kid is 2.5. And in the middle of just playing little preschool shapes games in the car, that fucker said rectangular prism. I don't even know how to make a rectangular prism with my hands. And then she called me and told me this, and I was like, no. Maybe he said something that sounded like that. And then I hear in the background going, rectangular prism, rectangular prism, rectangular prism. He's a mess.
Oh, that's so fun. That's so fun. So I am glad that we circled back because I do think it's important. Where we left it is, I don't necessarily like to use this term, but I don't quite know how else to say it. But leaving people with permission to sometimes just be in the muck, that there's probably something to learn. And I feel like that's where we left you, is sort of in the muck to figure out what that was. And so having those conversations, and this is something that I want to point this out because this happens so often with me, and it definitely happens here on our show, but every time one of us is in the muck, just being able to have the conversation with somebody that's safe to you, that you trust, to be able to say, I'm in the muck and it's just where I want to be. Saying that out loud begins to move the energy where all of a sudden, like, these doors open to other conversations that you have that slowly lay the groundwork to get you out of the muck. It's like they're putting the stepping stone in place for you. Like, do you notice that?
Yes. And you being a safe person in that moment meant that I could be mucky around you without worrying that you're just going to try to pull me out of it. Because sometimes trying to pull someone out of it can be invalidating of their experience.
Absolutely. And I walk a fine line with that because I did try to start walking you out of it. But then I recognized, and you resisted. And then I recognized after your resistance, which you gave back to me. And this is what I love about these kind of conversations with you as a friend. Now, as a coach, I can tell you I'm going to push back. Like if I'm with a client and I will say, tell me where I'm wrong, or where are you right now? Or what do you think about that? But when it's with a friend, I also am going in with the assumption that the things that I say, if I am trying to walk you out, if you're not there, I'm trusting that you'll tell me. Mm-hmm. And you did. You told me. You pushed that resistance, and then that sort of let me know, okay, this is where he is right now. All right, we need to shift gears. We need to figure out what's going on, why he's here, and then allow you to just be where you are, right? Mm-hmm. And just and wait. I'll just hold out my hand and wait for you.
And then I got there on my own time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think there are two things I want to say to this. First, there was a time a few episodes earlier when you got back from that trip and you had the whole issue with the person trying to keep your deposit and claiming that you had damaged the thing that in a way that you hadn't damaged it. And you were kind of like sitting in that in that anger.
Absolutely.
And we kind of left you there too.
Yeah.
And one of the things I suggested was maybe just sitting with yourself in that anger will grow your capacity to sit with other people when they're in their own muck.
Mm-hmm.
And then you turn around and that's exactly what you did for me. And I know people who have ADHD who vilify their ADHD, who blame everything on it. It's only a bad thing. It ruins their life. Exactly where I was at the beginning of that episode.
Mm-hmm.
And after hanging out there, I was only there for like a week. It's not fun to be there.
Right.
But after being there, I now have more empathy for the people who are there because I get it.
Mm-hmm.
I get it. I know how it feels to be in that place.
Mm-hmm.
And I've known people who have kept themselves there for decades because that's they don't. I mean, that's all they know.
Right.
And so
But
there's a greater capacity for me to be with them.
yes, there is, and it's like you're able to see the inner workings of their hysterectomy without having to.
It's like someone who's had a hysterectomy, then empathizing with somebody who
Yeah,
just had
right.
it.
Exactly.
Like it's different.
Because you
It's a
know.
very different thing. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
And so
So
then
I
I can,
bought-
but go.
Well, I bought this small canvas artwork a few years ago at this local art show, and it's probably like 5 or 6 animals that are standing.
Mm-hmm.
And they're intended to look like humans walking on 2 feet, and they all are dressed very different. They're all different shapes, different sizes, different colors, and different types of clothing. And I can't remember exactly what it says, but every time you keep talking about this is what's popping up for me in my mind is this canvas art of all these animals. And it says something to the effect of we are all different, but there's something fantastic about that. Right. And it's like that's a message that I was wanting you to see. And I think like that's what you're saying now as we're circling back is we all carry around different labels. You know, we all have this bag of labels that we can easily take out and try on and be that person for that day. But without those, if we were all homogenous, how incredibly boring would this life be? Like, what would even be our purpose if we weren't here to have these things, have these challenges that make us exactly who we are? What are we doing?
Well, I mean, even from a biological standpoint, diversity is survival.
Yes.
Evolution tells you that. The stock market tells you that. Like, I mean,
Right.
that's, yeah.
And so it's like you have 2 choices here. You can choose to kind of sit and wallow in that and bring that energy to you. And sometimes like that's necessary. I'm not saying don't do that. Obviously, you spent that week there, but don't spend years there. Right? Like how it's part of who you are, and that constant resistance, that constant fighting is only walking you away from every good that could be coming out of it.
Well, going back to what you said earlier, I think naming it is a huge thing. Naming what you want. Because once I said, I just want to sit in the suck. I said that.
Yep.
And after naming that, I heard it back and I realized that that's what I was doing. And then all of a sudden I'm accountable to that. And I have to live with the fact that that's like it becomes real when you say it.
And that's the point I was trying to make about sharing it with someone. If you would have just let that stay in your head and you're just story fondling that and it's just going in circles and you're kind of spiraling out with all those negative thoughts, you wouldn't really be able to hear it back in a way where you'd process it quite as quickly.
Right. Like when I was a filmmaker, it was one thing to watch your own film and your own editing thing and like it, but then the second you show it to somebody, it does not matter who it is. The fact that you're showing it to another person, you become aware of the fact that they have their own biases, their own opinions, their own thoughts, their own tastes, and they have their own thoughts about this that may not line up with what you think about it. And they don't even have to say anything. You just watch your own movie next to somebody else who hasn't seen it and is watching it too, and you will see the entire thing in a whole new light. And And like you're saying, part of it is just getting it out. Like I even remember, even if it's stupid, especially if it's stupid, because the other thing I had to say out loud was I just want it to be easy.
Yeah,
That's
right,
really what I
right.
was angry about. I want it to be easy. Well, who doesn't fucking want it to be easy? Everybody wants it to be easy.
Yeah.
But am I doing something about it? Am I figuring out how to make my life easier? Or am I just commenting on the fact that it's not? And once you say that out loud, I just want it to be easy. Then you can grapple with whether or not that's, actually just a whiny baby complaining about having to grow up, or if there's something deeper there. But if you don't ever say it out loud, then it doesn't have substance. It doesn't become a thing. And you can be kind of aware of it tangentially, but not really have a clear vision of what it is, and so you definitely can't work on it. I remember when I, we've been married for 12 years, and so we went in and out of counseling when things got hard, and at one of the points in time, our marriage counselor just asked me, like, Ryan, what do you want? And I thought about it for a while, and he said, why are you thinking about it for so long? You should know what you want. And I said, I'm trying to figure out how to say it that doesn't make me look like an asshole. And he goes, well, okay, now we're going somewhere. And then I eventually just said what I wanted, and it was completely unreasonable. It was unhealthy. It was not anything you should actually expect out of yourself or a life partner. But in that moment, it was what I wanted. And I was just able to say, okay, this is what I want. I don't like the fact that this is what I want. And I'm judging myself pretty hard for the fact that this is what I want. But I'm saying it out loud in front of my wife and you. This is what I want right now. And he said, okay, now we can work with that. And oh my God, it's so freeing. It's so empowering, because even if it, like I said, even especially if it's dumb, say it in front of somebody and hear how dumb it is.
Right.
Because the second that happens, if you want to be someone who's not dumb, you find all kinds of intrinsic motivation to figure that shit out. If nothing else, just to become a person who no longer really wants that and has to say out loud and own the fact that that's where they are.
So I teach a class on vulnerability and kind of how to have difficult conversations. There's some like how to be empathetic thrown in there, yada, yada, yada. But one thing I do is I have I assign the people that are in the class a task where they have to identify a vulnerability partner. And what that is it's somebody in your life that is safe to you, that you trust, someone's opinion that matters to you, but also that person that you can say, I just want it to be easy to, and they don't shame you, they don't dismiss you, they just kind of let it out. And so I think, because that's, now that we're talking about it, I think, if you don't have that person in your life right now, if you cannot identify one person that could be your vulnerability partner, then I would certainly encourage you to go find that person. Because when we talk about being in our true north and aligning with that, so much of it is also about community. And that's exactly why we have our tribe of people, because being in your true north requires community and connection so that you can let all that stuff out in a free, safe space to own it, to recognize it, to work on it, and then have your tribe accountable, hold you accountable to it in a way that is in your highest good.
Our tribe is like exactly what you're talking about. I was talking to one of our tribe members this past weekend. Just, hey, checking in, what's going on? How are you doing? Because I'll do that from time to time with all of them. And she goes, oh, I was just talking to this other tribe member for the last hour.
Yeah.
Connecting with each other, completely aside from our weekly calls or you and me or the podcast, like one-on-one connections that they're finding in this group.
Right.
And I mean, I didn't expect that when we started it, but it's so cool to watch. People are finding their way to exactly what you're talking about, a vulnerability partner.
Absolutely. And it's crazy because the other thing I want to point out about saying whatever it is that you're feeling in that moment and feeling safe to say it is you never know what the other person is going to get out of it. In our last tribe call, one of our members mentioned that she's seeing a therapist right now, and a lot of the things that she's getting out of it. And I'm going to be very vague here because I don't want to share her experience, and it's something I'm not ready to share about me yet, but she shared a tidbit, a takeaway that she learned from her therapist. And it was just like, it was a big aha moment for her. And the moment that she shared it with us, I went, holy shit, that's me. That is me. So like in her vulnerability, in sharing this thing about herself that she had learned that really helped her understand her behavior and why she was choosing to do what she was doing, also served me. Like I was able to then, going back to labels, label it. And so now that I can't not own that anymore.
Right.
Or pretend that it doesn't exist. Like this is a real thing for me that I now have to address. And so I circled back to her and I just, thanked her for her vulnerability and sharing what she did, and just let her know that I got a lot out of it myself, and just how grateful I was for that piece of information. So that's just kind of, I don't know. I just want to really hit on that if you don't have your tribe and you're trying to establish your true north, then definitely go find it. Go find that person. Go find those people that are supportive. This whole conversation, I don't know why. Okay, I'm getting tapped on the shoulder like a gazillion times. I'm supposed to bring up reference points.
Reference points.
Yeah. Okay. Reference points. They're like, Sarah in particular is like, you need to talk about reference points. So apparently I'm going to talk about reference points.
Does she ever not yell at you? Anytime
No.
you say what she's saying, she's like, there's this sense of urgency. Like, you have to do this. You have to do this.
It's always a very strong sense of urgency. And if I don't listen,
such a
she just
Sarah.
gets louder. She's getting louder about reference points. So
All right,
I
so
will,
I'm gonna
I will
shut up
figure
and
out.
you go.
I will figure out how they're going to fit into this conversation, because right now I'm like, haha, you're putting me on the spot. I don't know how this ties in, but here we go.
Reference points.
Reference points. So reference points. Let's take this example. So let's say that you make a certain income. Like when I worked for the Y, it was a nonprofit income, right? Not a very large income. If I used other directors at that level in the nonprofit world, my reference point for what I made was really good. I actually made probably on the higher end of program directors.
Right.
But if I started looking at incomes of directors, same skill set, same type of job in for-profit organizations or other groups, all of a sudden my income was like nothing. And then take it a step further. Let's say I start watching reality shows and I'm watching like the Kardashians and the crazy amounts of money that they have and they spend on material things in their lifestyle. Then I really have zero money. Like I'm very broke. So then my reference point constantly changes the more that I expand that world. And then what you do with your reference points is, well, what you do with your reference points contributes to your negative self-talk. So if I keep my reference points at a Kardashian level in terms of my income, I am always going to feel and be, quote unquote, be poor. But
Right.
if I, what the fuck does this have to do with what we're talking about? Could you please fill me in? So if I keep my reference point on realistically kind of other people that are within that same range, what does this have to do with what we're talking about? I'm going to ask you to delete all of this.
No, Abby. Maybe it doesn't actually have to do with what we're talking about. Maybe it can just be that we're shifting to reference points.
No, there's got to be a reason.
But do you have to know what it is right now? Maybe it'll become clear when we're listening to it
But
later.
when we talk about your ADHD, your reference points, you were sitting in a place where your reference points were people without ADHD.
Right.
And so okay. Reference points.
Are you still getting more?
No, I'm waiting. And she's standing there with her hands on her hips looking at me like, put it together.
And your hands are on your hips right now too.
Put it together.
We were talking about naming it. This is a master's class on how to listen to your spirit guide. and choke on your coffee.
Well, I'm failing at it if I can't.
You're just all stressed out because the whole world is
watching.
It's
live and everybody's listening, so I feel very on the spot. But I guess what a tribe can do, if we kind of circle it back to reference points and having a tribe and having that vulnerability partner, is they help you keep your reference points in check. Right? Like, and that's what I felt like I was trying to do with you when I was walking you out of it too early, is helping you remember that like your reference point is somebody that does have struggles and challenges from ADHD, but it does make you exactly who you are. I wanted it to shift your perspective to help you see all of the good that comes with it and not just the bad.
Well, also reference points have a certain place. But there are also places that they don't belong. Like your example of being quote unquote poor. You're only considered poor if you're comparing yourself to people who have more money, and those people are only considered rich if you're comparing them to people who have less. Mm-hmm. You know, like a poor person in America would be rich in so many other countries. And so in terms of comparative vernacular, reference points aren't just they're necessary. You can't really compare without reference points. But then go back to the episode where I was told that I am my own measuring stick. Mm-hmm. There's no reference point at all. I am the reference point.
Am
I
the
still
reference
me?
Point.
Cool. Well, then I'm exactly what I need to be. And then in that arena, the idea of a reference point doesn't have a place. It just isn't a factor in the equation at all. Things just simply are what they are. And so what I was looking for was I was looking to see if right now we're entering the Christmas season, and so for a lot of people that means a lot of Hallmark movies. And I was looking because I'm sure there's got to be a study out there that shows like the correlation between your satisfaction in your own relationship and how many Hallmark movies you're watching, because they're all like this perfect romantic ideal.
Perfect. Yep.
And I mean, from what I was able to look at during this podcast, it varies, but the idea is that if you're watching a Hallmark movie, you're going to compare your relationship to what you're seeing in that movie.
You've made that your reference point.
Mm-hmm. Whereas if you adopt a posture of things just being what they are, then they don't have to connect. Your relationship and the one you're watching on the screen don't have to have anything to do with each other, nor do they have to define each other.
So if you identify it as simply Christmas time entertainment.
Yeah, or if you can just disconnect it's the whole keeping up with the Joneses thing. Right? Like, your next door neighbor has a nice car, so you want a nice car. Well, you didn't want a nice car before you saw them with the nice car. They have a big house. I want a big house. You know, like, how often do we allow other people to be our reference points without even realizing it? Or maybe we realize it, but we don't ask ourselves if that's the right way to do it. Or if there's a better way to do it.
Right.
You know? So I still don't know what this has to do with naming it.
I don't
name it to tame
either.
it. But there is something to be said for moving to a place where you can just let things be what they are. Like, I used to have really bad road rage because I thought everything that people did on the road had an effect on me. And I adopted the mantra, drive as though they don't exist. Like, that person who's trying to cut you off or trying to speed up or whatever, just drive as though they don't exist. What would you do if they literally didn't exist?
And I drive as though they've just had a hysterectomy.
Right.
Like, I always think in my mind, I wonder what that person's going through that makes them so mindless that they just cut me off, or that makes them so angry that they want to honk and scream and yell, or, you know.
Right. I used to want to, like, teach those people a lesson or box them in where they can't go faster or something. But then I'm like, if I'm on the other side of town and I just heard that my kid's in the hospital, I'm going to speed through fucking traffic and the cops are going to chase me the whole way. They can write me a ticket when I get there. You know? So, like, I try to give myself a reason. But then there's the idea that, like, one of my favorite things to tell people when they're stuck in traffic is Also, for everybody else, you are the traffic.
Yeah, right?
You know? So like the
Yeah.
same effect that they're having on you, you're having on them. So you're having your experience, they're having their experience, and their experience is not at all tied to yours. You think it is, and you're going to talk to them through the lens of how their life affects you. But you don't think about how your life affects them. And so when you use their actions as your reference point for your value, it's very easy to have a problem with what other people do. When you use other Hallmark movies as a reference point for your relationship, it's very easy to have a problem with your relationship, even if you didn't have that problem before you watched that movie.
There
And
you
so
go.
I think maybe the thing is be mindful of your reference points. And a good way to do that is investigate your motivations. Why do I want to do this? Is it because somebody else wants to do this? Is it because I have an ideal in my head for what the thing should look like and I'm comparing what it is in my life to what I think it should be and trying to compensate? What is my motivation? And then, circling back, you have to name it. You have to be honest with yourself and say, oh, I want to make a lot of money because society told me that's where my worth comes from, and I'm comparing myself to other people who have a lot of money. Name it. Just own it. If that's where your motivation is, that's where your motivation is. I want romance in my relationship because I just watched a movie where people have romance in their relationship.
Do you think that speaks to people knowing their values, right? And maybe that their reference points triggers upon a value that they wish they were living in their lives, but in some way are not. And so then it becomes a judgment upon themselves, right? If you think about like romance, if you see this Hallmark movie and you're wanting romance in your relationship and you feel like you're lacking romance, well, then what is that value? What is that feeling, that emotion that you're trying to get that you're missing? And you're now externally driven and creating it to be a reward from that other person that you're trying to get instead of changing something within yourself.
Right. Or like asking yourself what romance actually does. Like what function does it have in your own narrative? And why do you feel like you want it now?
Do you really not have it? Do you just choose not to see it? Do you not work at it yourself? I mean, there's...
Right.
Kind of goes
Romance
back
20
to-
years into a relationship does not look like romance
Right.
2 years into the relationship. It can still be there, but it's not going
Right.
to look the same.
Right. But yeah, so that I mean, if you're using a reference point like that, even income, like if we go back to that example and you're looking at income and all of a sudden I'm looking at someone else's income and feeling that mine is inadequate, then what is it about someone else having more money that is bothering me? I guess this is all circling back to, I guess, when you identify what your reference points are and if they've been triggered, why are they being triggered?
Right.
is
Why
it
are you
that's missing
comparing
for you?
yourself to those things? I mean, it just comes back down to identity. Like you how often does a parent see somebody else who has like a really well-behaved kid and then think,
Yeah.
"Oh, they're a better parent than I am." And then because as a parent, the one story that we tell ourselves, at least in this generation, in this part of the world, is that your kid's behavior is a direct reflection on your ability to be a good parent. And if you identify as a person who is a parent, then it becomes a matter of identity for you that your kid demonstrates a certain type of behavior. And when they deviate from that, you want to correct it, not because you want to teach them how to act, but because it's a matter of identity for you that you're a capable parent. And you're telling yourself that the marker of you being a capable parent is them doing what you say and acting the way you want them to act. And then we say, go be independent and make your own decisions. And they're like, well, that's not what you taught me. And so then like the question is why? Why am I really, really, really triggered by the fact that my kid's being a crazy person? Because they're a toddler and all toddlers are crazy people. And I think it always comes back to a matter of identity. If you compare yourself to a shitty parent, you're going to feel fine about your parenting.
Yeah. That's true.
That's, and I have this weird dichotomous relationship with my dad because there are two dads in my head. Two Rodney Stevens Bayronses. The one who beat me up and was all anger and fear and toxic masculinity. And then there's the other one who decided that he was going to change all that and became like an actual good person and a great father and an amazing man. Like all of his weaknesses then got alchemized into his greatest strengths. They were always there, but they were expressing in serious unhealth. And then, he goes out of town for a while, comes back, and he's like, boom, I'm gonna be the opposite of that. And then he did, in a very real way, right? So I have the version of him that I hope one day I achieve, and the version of him that is a good marker that if I'm looking like that, then I'm not, on the right path. And so I have two polar opposite reference points for my own parenting wrapped up in the same person. And if I, at any point in time, when I am getting down on myself for a parenting fail, a time that I feel like I could have done better, or I'm looking back thinking, oh man, I really failed in the parenting department in that interaction, and I'm gonna have to, you get really guilty about it, you get really shameful about it, and you get down on yourself. I compare myself to the version of my dad that would have just smacked me in the face. He didn't hit us in the face. He didn't hit us in the face. I misspoke, but he hit us. And if I compare myself to the dad that hit us, I'm doing just fine.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, I think it's a matter of growing to the point where you are your own reference point. I think ideally you are your own reference point in all things. Nobody being any flavor of different than you will be a threat to you, nor will it be a validation. Someone being like you does not validate you doing it the way you're doing it. And someone being apart from you does not invalidate you doing it the way you're doing it.
Last time in that episode, I think it was that one, we also said you are exactly where you need to be.
Right.
And being able to accept and try on that statement for yourself, because that is hard for some people, is knowing your reference points. Because if you know your reference points, it's like the Uber analogy that we've been using. Have we talked about that yet here?
I don't know if we talked about it on the podcast.
But like Uber, anyway, the car services that pick you up, not necessarily Uber, they pick you up, but they have to know exactly where you are to come and get you. And they have to know exactly where you're going to take you where you want to go. Those are reference points. And the same thing is if you are trying to get to your true north, that is a reference point, then you are exactly where you should be is your reference point for now.
Right.
And it's just knowing that that's where you sit in your life. And those are the things that might challenge you from an ego mind perspective. But you are exactly where you're supposed to be. Those reference points are there on purpose. Just stay in your own lane, right?
Yeah, and so if it sounds like we're sending mixed signals, because part of this, what I'm hearing out of this conversation is just know your reference points and own them, regardless of what they are, and that's okay. And then another thing that people could take away from this is you should get to a point where you are your own reference point and other people don't matter. Not they don't matter, but they don't tell you whether or not you're more or less valid or worth anything, right? And I think both of those can coexist, but it's a process. So the beginning of the process is recognize your reference points, understand what you're comparing yourself to, and those are the things that you're deriving your value from. Where you compare yourself to those things, and how you compare is directly correlated to how valuable you think you are as a matter of identity and as a matter of your worth. And so know that, identify it, and then be on the lookout for it so that when it happens, you can then begin to do the work of detaching from those things. Because they don't define your worth, they don't define your value, and some well-behaved kid doesn't mean that you're a shitty parent, and some terrible kid doesn't mean you're a good parent. You're the parent that you are. Period. Regardless of what all those other things are. And so that's like an end state. Will you ever get there? I don't know. I don't know if I've ever met anybody who's actually there all the time. And it feels kind of detached, honestly. But the work is moving in that direction and being intentional about making that the direction you're moving, because it's freeing you. When you get to the point where watching a romance movie no longer makes you question your relationship, is freeing, because then you can let that story be what it is without, getting all neurotic about it and trying to wrestle something that's real into fitting something that's not. When you are in this place, you can look at somebody who has the Lamborghini and not be like I'm going to be there one day. Like, oh, I am where I am. I like my Honda. It gets better gas mileage.
Right.
Which I've driven a Lamborghini, and that's fucking stressful.
Why?
Maybe because it wasn't mine, and because I had never driven stick before. But I never, ever.
Whoa! The very first time you drove a stick was a Lamborghini. Oh
Okay,
my gosh! Who trusted you with their car?
My employer, of all people.
Gosh.
I'm just gonna leave it there and not tell that story. No, I had driven stick. I've learned to drive stick 3 times in my life, but it's like someone takes you into their old beat up slug bug into an empty parking lot, and you grind their gears a little bit until they kick you out of their car. I've done that a few times. This was a paddle shift, so it wasn't. I didn't actually have the stick. Yeah. It was just behind the steering wheel and everything. But I really should not have been driving that car. It was fine because I have learned that they're so low that there's actually a button that raises the nose so that if you're not on completely flat terrain, it'll actually not damage it. And that button was made for people like me. But all I'm saying is that if you are motivated to be Lamborghini guy because you see Lamborghini guy and you think I want that life. Mm-hmm. The first step is to own that, recognize it. Don't judge yourself. You're gonna judge yourself. Because then you're going to think, oh, I shouldn't be motivated by that kind of thing. Okay, well, get through that and process it and then stop judging yourself and have compassion on yourself and just own that that's where you are. And then figure out why that's what you're motivated by. What is it about you that you think is tied to that thing? What is it about your worth and your value that you think is determined by this external thing? And do that work. And that's usually going to send you straight back into your childhood and the culture that raised you and your family of origin dynamics and all that kind of stuff. And then once you have all that raw material to work with, then you work with it, and the work is getting to a point where you can see Lamborghini guy without envying their Lamborghini.
There you go.
Or insert whatever thing it is that you're comparing yourself to if you're not Lamborghini guy.
Mm-hmm. I used to, before I had a kid, I'd always say, I'd see a kid that was, goofing off, getting in trouble. And I would judge that parent like, oh my gosh, if I ever had kids, my kid would never do that. Right. And then I had a kid and I had the toddler that broke down on the floor in the middle of Target screaming and yelling. And I let him sit there and I got all kinds of dirty looks, but he needed to have his feelings and get it out. And then, so we could move on. So I wasn't going to shut it down.
That but happens to me. And I'm just like, why are you judging me? I'm not the one throwing the tantrum. Judge the kid, man.
I used to get so upset when I had an issue with a kid at the Y and I had to talk to their parents, and inevitably I probably sounded mightier than thou, and it would come back around to me, and the parent would say, "Do you have kids?"
I knew that was coming.
And I would just get so mad. I would say, "Yeah, I have 100 of them." These are my kids.
That question is never a question. That question is a statement. And that statement is stay in your lane. You don't
stay
understand.
In your lane. But it's that whole point of I can obviously now empathize with parents who are struggling with their kiddos in public because I have now been there myself.
And you can empathize with the people who don't have kids and are very defensive of their ability to work with them.
Exactly.
Because it is kind of also a very attacking, belittling phrase. It's like all that training that you went through, it doesn't really matter. And in one sense, it doesn't. But also, you're not paid to be their parent. You're that's a different role. Anyway, I just need to say this. I feel like I've said it before, and I'm going to say it again, and I'll probably say it again later in another episode. But when I'm in the store and I see parents with kids who are melting down. It always happens in the toy aisle because the parent said no, right? Or something like that. There's a kid who's just melting down. You can hear him anywhere you are in the Target. And I walk by those parents, and I don't have a dirty look for them. I have compassion face because I've been that parent. I know how much it sucks. I know how hard they're trying. I know how much they are, exploring what it means for them to have their own sovereignty while these two larger humans are trying to exert their will on them, and that sucks, right? Like, I've been there, and I understand that you're doing the best you can, and this is not a reflection on you as a parent. And so if I do manage to make eye contact with them, it's always like this, like, I am with you. Like, you have my support. You have my emotional support, all the compassion. You're doing great. Keep up the great work. You're fine. They're fine. right?
Yep.
And so I have the story that I tell myself that if you've been there and you see that, you're going to also have the compassion. Right? So what I try to do is reverse that, where I'm in Target, kids melting down in a toy aisle because I just said no. Other parent with kids walks by. Most of the time, they're not even shooting you a dirty look. That's just their face. But you interpret that as a dirty look because what are you thinking? You're thinking, oh man,
oh my gosh,
everybody in the store can hear this kid, and I'm a bad parent, right? And so you're living in that, and you're projecting that onto the people who are looking at you and thinking that that's what they're projecting back into you.
Yeah.
And I have to tell myself, if they have kids, they fucking know what I'm going through, and they're probably looking at me with compassion face, and there's solidarity there, and there's support and encouragement in the face that they're giving me, not the will you shut that kid up. And so then all of a sudden it goes from feeling like the worst parent to just one in a sea of parents who are all doing our best. And it allows me to breathe. And then when I stop and breathe, he stops and breathes.
And this is a perfect example of not like you are sitting in your kid's business if you're choosing to get all worked up about their behavior, because then you're getting yourself worked up. And exactly as you said, you're just feeding off of each other. You're sitting in the humility of, your kid breaking down in the middle of Target, and he's, just because we've been that kid too. Like I've been that kid. I'm been
still
the
that kid
that's thrown the fit in Target. But this beautiful thing happened this morning. I dropped my son off at school, and we were a little late getting there, so there was no other parent, and it was one of the teacher aides that was outside doing the check-in, and saying my goodbyes to him, and he goes off to the playground, and I'm kind of walking back to my car, and she goes, I just want to tell you, your son is such a pleasure to have in class. Like he's one of the kindest kids I know. Like if somebody gets hurt, he's like the first kid there that's checking to see how they feel and if he can get them anything. And, I'm just like having this proud mama moment. Like, yeah, I'm doing something right. Like I'm teaching my kid kindness and everything. And I get in the car and like all of a sudden I'm having this internal struggle where why am I owning this as my own, but I'm not owning, let's say, that moment in Target as, like...
Because that's also him.
Because that is also him. And so the crazy thing is I really had to step out of it and say, this has nothing to do with me. All I've done, as you said, is model. I have modeled for him how to be kind. I have modeled for him how we show up. I've modeled for him how to stand up for himself, how to have feelings, that it's okay to have feelings, all of this. And then it's on him as a human to take that and interpret it and feed that back out into the world. And basically that's what she told me he was doing. And so it was just this beautiful moment of, like, I'm thinking it as a parent win. Yes, awesome. I've taught him kindness. But at the same time, I feel in a way it made me proud of myself that I was able to model it well enough that he's trying it on. And then that's making a shift for him. But then I was also just seeing him as a human for just a minute, that he is both of those people. He's the kid that melts down on occasion, but he's also the kid that will show up for somebody else if they're hurting. And
so are we as adults.
Yeah, exactly.
And those are two sides of the same coin, because those are both results of him being very in touch with his emotional landscape.
Yeah. Yeah.
You can't have one without the other. That's interesting, because I watched this I don't know the rank, but he was some kind of commanding officer in the military talking about his philosophy as a leader. And he essentially said, anything that my subordinates do right is their fault. Anything that they do wrong is my fault. And I thought, okay, that's a really good way to lead, like, when you're a bunch of adults in some type of, like, work setting, right? Even in management in the corporate America, that was kind of the idea. But in parenting, it's tricky because, like you said, you want to take the victories. When they're a good kid, you want to say, yeah, that's me. I was a good parent that led them to do that. But then self-compassion when they're being crazy comes in the form of being like, oh, that's them. They're on their own journey. They're a toddler. That doesn't mean I'm a bad parent, right? And you can't have it both ways. So if we're going to adopt the moniker that your child's behavior is not an indication of your ability to parent well, then that means that even when they do good stuff, you don't get credit for it either. It's just them.
Right.
Because I've known people who are great people, emotionally stable people, smart people, capable people, and who parent exactly the way that I would in their shoes, and still just have very challenging kids.
Right. Yep.
And I also know people who just, I would parent differently. If that's how I can say it without judgment. And their kids are just angels. Mm-hmm. Like your kids are going to be who they are going to be. Not that you're not molding them and not shaping them, and you definitely have influence on them. But they came into this world to be who they came here to be, and they will find a way to be that, regardless of what you do or don't do.
Right. Yeah. I mean, they're a soul that's here to learn a journey as well, and so that's sort of been my parenting MO. For a while. Like, he's here to learn his own lessons, not here to meet my agenda. So how can I best guide him? And I can best guide him by the things that I choose to do for myself. I mean, he needs guided. He's a kid, right? There's just not like, yeah, kid, have at it. Go do your thing.
Right.
But I do that by examples. And then clearly he's, getting very clear evidence that works for him as well.
Right.
Because that kindness is reciprocated, and people want to be his friend, and he's a joy to be around. And he gets things when he can not whine and ask in a nice way, kind of thing. Like, he's figuring these things out all on his own, instead of me saying, stop crying, go help that person, they fell down. Like, I'm just doing it. And then he's just doing it. And he's seeing, what happens.
Right, and you're modeling what relationship looks like, right? Like, what you're describing is that you are a safe place for him to work out what it means for him to be him.
Yes.
And we started this podcast talking about how you did the exact same thing with me. 2 episodes ago, you were being a safe place for me to work out what it looks like for me to be me. And then, not completely devoid, again, you had influence, but I did the thing on my own time. And in my own way. Would I have without your influence? Probably not. Maybe I would have taken longer. Maybe I wouldn't have been forced to name it. You definitely moved me along. But you were originally motivated to be the thing that got me all the way there. That's what she said. And then you just did your part and let me do the rest. Also what she said.
Oh, goodness. We forgot to start with gratitude today.
No!
So we'll end with gratitude.
That lasted one whole episode.
Yes. What are you grateful for today?
This is not me trying to come up with one. This is me trying to choose one. My day-to-day looks very different now than it did a couple of weeks ago. What I do with my time, how I prioritize what I do, how I plan what I do, how I actually do what I do. And I would say like 90% of that is due to one friend I have who has been relentless in their pursuit of helping me to be better at life. Not in a, you should do this. Why aren't you doing this? I'm going to take over and dictate for you. Like, it wasn't that. It was just, it's always been in the form of questions. Hey, why are you doing that? Why are you doing it that way? And again, just getting me to a place where I have to name it, and then hearing myself name it out loud and be like, oh yes, after saying this to another human, I can immediately think of 1,000 better ways to have done this. Just questioning, just poking and prodding, being a safe person. There's no judgment there or condemnation or trying to, wrangle me into doing it a different way, but just asking, not even critiquing, just simply asking why, asking what, has gotten me to like completely rearrange my relationship with like the workday section of my unemployed life in a way that has like narrowed focus and become more productive and less stressful and less frazzled and less all over the place and more pointed towards something real. And yeah, so I'm just grateful for that person and for that input and what my life looks like in this very present moment because of it.
I love that. That is definitely a good friend, a true friend.
Just the best. What are you grateful for, Abby?
Oh, I have been full on practicing gratitude hard all month long. And this is, oh, this is funny. This is sort of a twofold gratitude, I guess. But the first part is I'm just grateful for the universe's reminder that where your attention flows, energy goes. So, you know, I've been putting all this gratitude stuff out there, and I got caught up in my ego mind this week. Like, why are people not responding to this? You know, why is this not a bigger deal? This is, it can be so impactful. How come people aren't just embracing this? We really need this right now. And I'm kind of getting frustrated about it. And then I was reminded by a good friend, which is the other part of my gratitude, that, you know, people don't always share with you what they get out of it. It's either too public, it's not a safe space for them, so to be vulnerable to tell you how it works for them or how it's changing them. And then you're sitting in their business. If you're so worried about them responding to what you're putting out there. And I thought, yeah, you know, you're exactly right. Like, I started this project for me, and the point was modeling, going back to modeling. Like, I want to model gratitude because it is so beneficial. And then if I put the work out there, the people that need the work, very much like this podcast, the people that need this will circle back. They will find us. It will be there. And we may never know how that impacts somebody's life. So, you know, I shift my perspective, kind of eat humble pie for a little bit and really get real with the reasons why I'm doing this, and just trust in the universe that this is working for people. And I don't have to know that. And of course, sure enough, like as soon as I shifted my perspective, all of a sudden, things keep coming in from people in a variety of ways of how this thing has blown up. There's a lady on the other side of town from me that last year we had a huge tornado that came through the area, and it kind of wiped out our whole neighborhood, and we were trying to help build resiliency back. And so I gifted her this whole gratitude tree set, like stuff, everything, so that just to kind of create a community tree. Like, even though our houses and walls and trees are taken down, we're still a community. And she never got to put it up, and she ended up putting it up this year. Well, now Channel 8 is coming out to do
What?
To do like a highlight on her tree. And so she just told us, like, she told me about it because she's like so ecstatic. She was just so ecstatic to even put it up in the first place. And then somebody caught wind of it on Instagram, and now they're coming out to see her. And there's been a couple of other things, you know, where I think, okay, this is not really taking off. Like, we started gratitude trees at the school that I work with in Allen, just the trees. They did these craft paper trees. We're like 3 years into this now, and they've got all their staff writing letters of gratitude to other staff members. They have all their kids doing virtual gratitude trees. They spend a whole month learning about what it is. You've got teachers taking initiative and doing, and I'm like, oh my gosh, right? Like, it's just like, okay, I hear you. So I'm just grateful that when I choose to follow my true north mind, kind of get out of ego mind, like, it unfolds everything that I was longing to see. Just that piece of evidence, like, okay, you know, this is working for people. It's guiding people in the right direction to raise our vibration. Like, it showed it to me the moment that I stopped worrying about it, the moment that I stopped thinking about it.
Isn't
They
that
said,
crazy
here you
how
go.
you have to have you have to want to and try to shift your perspective before the universe will confirm that shift?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I had to start choosing to be grateful for my ADHD before I got several signs that it was not only helpful for me, but helpful for other people.
Right.
Like, even
Right.
there's, and I don't want to miss this. You mentioned people won't always tell you the positive impact that you have.
Mm-hmm.
And it is I think it's a really beneficial practice to just act like you're influencing them the way that you want to influence them anyway, without that feedback.
Right.
Because you just might. Like, I drove a buddy to the hospital for a surgery this week, and he asked me how I was doing. And ne'er in the history of humanity has anyone asked me a more loaded question than a simple inquiry into how I was. And so I told him, and I ranted about the ADHD thing because that's the thing of the week for me. And I said, here's what I learned, and here's what I was angry about, and here's how I processed it, and here's where I am now. And at the end of the day, I just have to ask myself, what am I experiencing, and how is it working for me, and not against me? And by the time I was done ranting about this, we had gotten to the hospital, and he had a notebook, and he was writing in it, taking notes on what I was saying. And then he goes, Ryan, we don't have time for me to express to you how helpful everything you just said was to me in so many different aspects of my life.
Mm-hmm.
And then he got out of the car and went to surgery. And I was like, wow. And if I hadn't gotten that feedback, I still would have made that impact.
Exactly. Right.
You never know.
So I have one word to sum all that up.
Go.
Surrender.
Oh, this just became a 2-hour episode.
We will talk about that next episode.
To be continued. Surrender.
Surrender.
We should go back to the part 1, part 2 for this. We'll see. We'll see what happens. Well, next time is the Thanksgiving one.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we can make that work. We'll see. I don't know. I'm not in the future yet, okay? Until next time. Thank you for loving me. Thank you for being there.
Bye. We are grateful for you. Thank you for listening. And if you like what we're doing and you want more, then you can join our tribe to interact with other like-minded individuals. You can go through our Patreon page, which is patreon.com/True North Podcast 11.
Is it Podcast 11 or is it True North 11?
Oh, shit.
It's in our show notes. If you want more than that, you want some more hands-on healing stuff that we do, I do actual energy healing and body work, and Abby does life coaching and workshops. And you can find the URLs in our show notes when we figure out what they are.
Mm-hmm. And we are always trying to increase our reach and bring more people to find their true north. So we would really appreciate it if you could leave a review and rate it in whatever podcast platform you use.
Done. That's perfect. That was
What about
perfect.
the gratitude?
Oh, this one. Hang on. And one last thing. What are you grateful for? There. I said it. I said the thing.